Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Reason We Learn. I'm Deb Philman, mom, homeschooler, ex-teacher, and individualist. So earlier today, I posted this panel discussion to my community saying that this was a must-watch, and I want to comment on this directly because I really mean it. It is a must-watch. If you are trying to understand critical race theory in general, why critical race theory is dangerous, in particular in our schools and colleges, this is a great panel discussion. It will take you about an hour to watch it, but it's so worth it. Put it on in the background like a podcast while you're driving somewhere or whatever, and that's what I did, and you will be glad you did. In this discussion, you have Karlyn Borysenko, you have Christian Watson, Mike Gonzalez, James Lindsay, Keith Ammon, Christopher Rufo, and they each bring a different kind of expertise to this topic. Karlyn brings her expertise with organizational psychology. Christian Watson talks about his experiences in college debate and what happened to him there. He's still in college, he's a junior in college, but he basically got sort of drummed out of debate because his approach, his critical thinking approach, his more Aristotelian, Enlightenment values were just unwelcome. College debate for him was about affirming critical race theory and using, emotional arguments to effectively crowd out critical thinking. James Lindsay, of course, has studied this in depth. He maintains New Discourses, which is a site you really should subscribe to and read extensively if you want to understand these topics. And Mike Gonzalez brings extensive experience just traveling, living in other countries, and he has perspective on the world and, what it means to abandon individual liberty, what that could lead to. So, we have, and Chris Rufo, of course, has done so much fantastic work exposing what's happening inside schools on the ground. What are the specific examples of how this is put into practice, not in theory, but in practice? So you've got different perspectives showing you sort of theoretically what you can do with the workplace, in the school, and then practically what's happening in the schools with Christian and Christopher Rufo. So this panel discussion was for the purposes of helping representatives in New Hampshire specifically successfully defend a measure that is seeking to ban critical race theory in public spaces using public dollars. So in schools, universities, public workplaces, because what this measure does is not necessarily ban critical race theory, it just bans the practices associated with it, such as segregation, coercive speech, scapegoating, and stereotyping by race. This would do just as much to prevent the KKK and the Aryan Nation from, teaching their ideas in schools and public spaces as it would the critical race theorists, teaching these things as facts, for example. A couple of things I wanted to point out that struck me from this panel discussion and that I wanted to respond to. First of all, the point was made by someone, I can't remember who, that the government does not have unlimited free speech. One of the arguments against this bill is that it restricts free speech. You can't do that, or you can't restrict a free speech. If I'm a professor at UNH or I'm a teacher in a school, you can't restrict my free speech. Actually, yes, they can. If you are representative of government, you do not have unlimited free speech. Free speech is there for the people, but you do not get to be an elected official paid by tax dollars and go in and just state things as fact or push ideas onto other people that effectively restrict their rights and restrict their free speech simply because you're government. That's not how it works. It's the other way around. So this idea that teachers or schools and curriculum developers have all the freedom in the world to go into a school and teach your child anything they want and call that free speech is ludicrous. That's been well established. They can't, a Christian teacher can't go in and teach the Bible as fact in a public space. So why would they be able to teach critical race theory as fact? You can't do that. You don't have unlimited free speech. There are certain things that we, agree to as the governed, and one of them is that that you cannot indoctrinate in this way. It would be a massive conflict of interest, and it's simply not allowed. So that's one mistaken assumption that people make, is that, the government has the same free speech rights you do. No, they don't. The next thing that struck me was people were asking, what do I do and how do I answer constituents when they say, well, um, but uh, how do I explain to people that this isn't um, preventing them from fighting racism, or that this really is bad? What do I do when they come at me and say, this is, you're trying to allow racism to continue, et cetera, and they're actually pushing critical race theory. They're pushing for it and claiming that it's misunderstood. And I thought about that. I listened to the different responses. There were a range of responses. Chris suggested using very specific examples, saying, hey, in this classroom, kids were, forced to chant to the Aztec god of human sacrifice. Or in this classroom, that, first graders were told they had to deconstruct their racial and sexual identities. And I mean, these are pretty compelling examples. But what can happen, as it happened in New Hampshire and would probably happen to you, is if that didn't happen in your state or your locality, somebody might say, okay, well, that was there. That's not here. They don't really understand that the underlying idea is travel. It doesn't matter that it hasn't happened yet in your school district. If they adopt these ideas, it's going to end up there very quickly. I've seen these slides and curriculum materials, and they're the same no matter where you go. You have these oppression matrix documents. You have stereotyping of white people. You have scapegoating of white people. You have coercive speech. It pops up in all of them. So it's not about what state it is. You can't comfort yourself by saying, well, that was California, that was Seattle, that was here. No, it could happen where you are too. So I agree with him that specific examples certainly are compelling and get people's attention. I'm not sure that would work with everyone. I think Karlyn made an excellent point that bears repeating, which is when it's hard, when people are pushing back and accusing you of being a racist and, calling you names and making it painful, threatening to fire you or replace you or whatever, this is your time to think about that moment when you first learned about the Holocaust or Nazi Germany, and it may have crossed your mind, what would I have done? Where would I have been? What would I have said if that first began, and I was one of the people who had some say in local government, or had some say when people were pushing these ideas, what side would I have been on? How you respond in these situations right now with critical race theory is your answer. It quite literally is your answer. If you're okay with allowing people to be stereotyped and segregated and forced to say things about themselves that they do not believe to be true, to violate their values and their consciences, on pain of losing their job or being ostracized or being mocked or bullied in the classroom, it's just for their little kid. If you are going to allow that to happen, you are basically on the side of the people who allowed Nazism to rise and the Holocaust to happen. That's absolutely the same idea, even though it's not literally Nazism or literally, the final solution. That's not the point. The point is, if you would rather allow people to be discriminated against in that way and to be forced to do and say things against their will in a supposedly free country, you're complicit. You literally are complicit. And it's ironic coming from people who claim that if you are a white person and you don't speak up on, against racism according to their plan, that you're complicit in racism. It's backwards. They're projecting. So I thought that was something that bore repeating. But what I really liked was what Christian said. He suggested that people ask questions, that rather than try to provide answers, to try to answer every question with well, let me give you these examples, that, or to defend your dislike of critical race theory. Then instead you ask the person who's coming at you with, how can you oppose it? With the simple question of, what do you like about it? Tell me what you specifically like about it. Why do you think this is an effective way to fight racism? Make them give you examples. Make them give you reasons and data. Ask them for the data. Say, can you point me in the direction of data that shows how this is effective at improving outcomes for the specific parties you claim to be defending? Tell me how this helps Black students, for example, do better in school and, read more proficiently, do math more proficiently, think more critically, be better able to make good choices in their lives and prepare for college, career, and beyond. Tell me how teaching them to be very focused on their race will do that. Tell me how this elevates them. If they come back with something like, well, this will dismantle white systems of oppression, and say, okay, well, I don't necessarily agree that all that exists as far as you're describing it, but let's say it did. How does it? How does it dismantle these systems of oppression? How does it work that way to tell the Black students that they can't get ahead unless the white students do all these things, and to tell the white students that they are complicit in all this evil of racism? Tell me exactly the mechanics of how that works. Can you explain it to me? Is there data I can look at? So Christian was encouraging questions, and I really like that method best, because the more you ask people questions, and he made this point too, the more you ask people questions about the thing they are supporting, and the less able they are to answer you, the more their whole argument falls apart, and the more likely they are, in fact, to start questioning their own beliefs. It's really easy to just go at people and at people, and just bully them and browbeat them until hopefully they'll back down or be intimidated into just shutting up. But when you calmly turn back and say, okay, well, I'm listening, but I have some questions. I really want to better understand this. How does it work? Why do you like it? What is it specifically that appeals to you about this? Why do you think it's a good idea to segregate people in a classroom? How does this help? What kind of impression do you think the students are getting from this segregation? Be very specific. What's the message you would like the white child to take home at the end of this class? What's the message you would like the Black child to take home at the end of this class? And how do you know they're getting that message? What is the language you're using that conveys that message? Please be specific. You need to put them in the position of explaining to you why they are right. Not why you're wrong. That's easy to do. That's easy to just, blah, 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 you're wrong for these reasons that aren't even reasons. I'm going to accuse you of being racist. I'm going to accuse you of being white supremacist. You just hate this because you're a bad person. It's easy to tear you down. Especially when you're hurling insults, epithets, and lies. But it's a lot harder to defend your own position, especially when it's built on lies. So I think Christian is onto something. I think you should watch this, listen very closely to what he says, and listen to all of them, of course. And I don't want to downplay what Chris said. These specific examples are really potent, especially if somebody asks you for examples. Like, give me an example. What do you mean? How does this hurt kids? Give them some of the examples Chris mentions. And, unless they're a true believer revolutionary, they're going to go, oh my God. And as I said, the worst they could say is, well, that's happening there. And then you say, okay, yes, but ideas are ideas are ideas, and they travel. And even Chris will point out they've happened all over this country, in pretty much every corner of this country. So it's not specific to region, it's specific to the ideas. So those were my takeaways. I hope that helps. I really encourage you to go watch this. It is fantastic. And then, as I said, start thinking of the questions you would ask proponents of this idea. You may find yourself in a training someday. You may find yourself having to prepare your child for a class like this. And, I would prefer you pull your kids out of the school so they don't have to deal with this. But if you absolutely have to prepare them to go into something like this, prepare them to ask these questions. And, make sure they understand that they may not get answers. You may not get answers. You may get non-answers. You may get further accusations. But I hope you and your child and anybody else you talk to understands that that's not okay. That's not okay. When somebody wants to walk into a classroom in particular, but also in a workplace, and force you to undergo a training and force you to say things or endure things, and, even sit silently when you'd rather, speak up for yourself. And they're not going to answer your questions. They're not going to engage in debate, or they treat every question as an affirmation of what they're saying. That's not logical. That amounts to a giant ad hominem attack on you. It's an appeal to emotion. And you should feel perfectly comfortable to just ignore them and treat them like Charlie Brown's teacher. In fact, I would even go farther and say you and your child should feel perfectly comfortable to politely get up and say, I'm really not going to derive any value from this, so I'm going to remove myself from this situation because I believe it to be toxic and harmful to me. Goodbye. Just politely walk out of the room. You are not literally a prisoner in any of these trainings. Something that is mandatory to attend, you have attended. You found it not to have value. You have reasons you can later give. Say, I attempted to ask these questions. I thought they were reasonable questions. Instead of getting answers, I got ad hominem attack against me, bullying against me. And I have better things to do, namely to be productive for this company, produce value for our customers, or as a student, I need to protect myself psychologically and emotionally and even intellectually. And I can't do that if I continue to remain in this room. So that would be like for a high school student, even a middle school student. For an elementary school student, please, I beg of you, just pull them out if this starts to come to your school, because you cannot protect a young child. Karlyn made that point. If your child is below the age of 10, I would say there's no inoculation against this. This will hurt them. This will hurt them. And it's only a matter of degree. It's not going to be zero. It's just a matter of how badly it will hurt. There's no reason for any child to go through this. So again, I hope you found this useful. If you did, I hope you will consider subscribing to the channel, like this video, comment on this video, share this video and the video of the panel far and wide. People need to see it. They need to listen carefully to it and be prepared for this to come to their district, their state, etc. Other states are putting forth bills just like this one. If yours isn't, I suggest you think about trying to make that happen. All right, thanks for watching. Have a great evening.